As you can see on your screen, some very, very interesting scenes as the build up towards the day of Arba'een increases day by day in and around Karbala. The walking actually, is traditionally known to walk from Najaf to Karbala, but as we know, the dedication of the Zuwar of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, they can walk from as far as places as within Iraq, Basra, but we've even heard stories of people walking from the different Gulf regions, like Bahrain, for example. People have walked from Iran, other people have walked from Saudi Arabia. And when I say walk, I literally mean it's not like getting a bus from one area to the other. It's walking. And so what you see on your screens is the camps that have been built by the different servants of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, upon which they give shelter and food and water, and sometimes even outside of the norm services to the Zuwar, like even people massaging the feet of the Zuwar. I've seen places like you can charge your phones, for example. There's many different aspects to the walk, just to try and make as not to make the walk simpler, but just to provide the necessities for them to be able to survive during that walk between Najaf and Karbala traditionally. In this segment, Verses of Love, we take a bit of a deep dive. We delve into the connection to Imam Hussein alayhi salam through the form of recitations, poetry, lamentation, and really emotion as well. So every single day we have different guests and different reciters. Today I'm joined by my dear friend, and it's an honor to be with him as well once again, the poet Nouri Sardar. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
We've had some very interesting and fascinating discussions surrounding your personal journey when it comes to writing poetry, and how it's changed over the years depending on what situation you're going through at the time. I think what's very fascinating for the viewers to know, for myself as well, from a writing perspective, of course, from your work, we understand there's two forms. There's either the albums and the tracks that you do, or it's which is online based, and it's more public facing, where you're actually delivering the poetry to the viewers or to the audience, right? Both of them has the root, and that's actually writing the poem itself. Tell us a bit more about the process that you go through when creating an idea for a live recitation.
So that's actually very interesting, because I learned quite recently, and I wish I'd learned earlier, that a poem should know what it's being intended for. So for example, like I said, you got the album recitations, then you got the ones that I perform live, and then you got the ones that are written that I expect people to read. Early on, what I used to do is I used to take a tune of a latmiya or something that I like, write a poem to that same tune, and then I'd use it perhaps for the album, perhaps I'd recite it as well, perhaps I'd leave it there in my book for people to read. Thereafter, I realized that you need to fine tune each poem to where it's going to be used. So for example, these days for a live recitation, I'll make sure that there's a lot of wordplay involved. It's very easy on the ear in terms of the flow of it as well, which is where the spoken word influence comes in as well.
Just holding on to that point itself, how do you capture the attention of the audience? Because with recitation, what we do is we, for example, vary when it comes to the tone, the pace. What do you do to
So I mean, ironically, it's actually very similar. You want to go, and this is what recording in the studio taught me as well as looking at like different ways of public speaking. You want to slow down, you want to speed up, you want to use a soft voice, you want to use a powerful voice. And subhanAllah, even though it's not reciting per se, there's still a lot of reciting elements involved in that. And I found that even my vocal cords have strengthened because of it. And it's very interesting, because what you want to do is you want to leave the audience in such a way where they're not expecting, they don't know what you're going to say next, but at the same time you capture their attention. So it's quite interesting to delve into. So
tell me a bit more then about the difference between how you would write for a live audience to a track. Then.
So again, it depends. If on the track, for example, I'm working with another reciter, I have to think how does he recite, firstly.
So another element of your three different types is actually writing depending on the requests of the reciter.
So I think the best example I can give you is once there was an Arabic reciter, quite renowned one, who wanted a poem from me, and I knew his English was horrible, right? So what I did was I wrote it in such a way where when he would recite it, the types of letters used would be easy on his Arabic tongue.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that extends to
even that.
Yeah, to that extent. So even like, for example, if I write for you, for example, versus if I write for someone like Imran Datu, I know that you have very different reciting styles. You know, I know that there's certain things that would sound better the way he says it. You know, that powerful Urdu kind of line by line poetry, as opposed to when you can tell stories and you can bring flow into it.
Yeah, because our style, for example, I can tell a story because my style allows me to.
Exactly.
Because the Iraqi style is each verse.
It's about that. It's about intimacy. It's about, you know, painting a story. Yeah. Whereas the Pakistani style, it does do the same thing, but it's about bars. It's about line after line of just wow, wow, wow.
So you have to have those bingo lines.
Exactly. Yeah. So it just depends what I'm writing for. And then of course album, as we know, you know, album is something. It's probably the hardest one because you know you're recording it in a.
That's what you're really judged by, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean that's what people are going to listen to most.
Yeah, so
no one's going to read the books, you know, as much as you'd like.
Yeah,
but everyone's going to hear the album, right?
So that has to be the best quality that you have. So is there a lot of pressure on you?
Like I've been saying, you can only try your best. I mean, you can. I think the mistake I make, and maybe you can understand this. Whenever I do something new, I say, okay, I'm doing something that's never been done before. I'm doing something fantastically original. I'm doing something that's new. I'm showing Imam Hussein through a new light. But ultimately, all I'm doing is just trying my best with what I have and the perspective I have at the time. And beyond that, you can't really do anything else.
Yeah, it's difficult because just from your explanation alone, you have to. There's so many different aspects you have to consider before you actually write the poem. So it could range from who you're writing it for, what kind of audience, even to the extent that you're actually contemplating which letters to use because it may suit a certain reciter. So does the quality of the poem
this is the funny thing because
be affected?
Recently in the past year or so, I have kind of slowed down writing for other reciters because I just felt like I wasn't anymore writing for myself. I was just writing to, which, you know, of course, like serving Imam Hussein, like I said before, it's a very broad term and it's very important. But at the same time, I felt like I was just writing too much for others and not enough for myself. I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I wasn't writing because I had the emotive feel to do so. I was writing because there was majlis coming up and the reciter needed a poem, and you know, it is what it is.
Why has that changed?
Again, I think it all comes back to where you are at the time, you know, in your life in regards to the poetry. Both of our creative arts, all they do is they reflect who we are and reflect who we are at certain periods of our life. Yeah. Right. So right now I'm in a period where I feel like I've done, you know, a lot in terms of the poetry world, and what I want to do now is just do things that reflect myself, things that I enjoy, write about what I enjoy, you know, write about things that interest me, write about things that are emotive to me. And like I said, I'm sure I'll come back to writing for reciters. I mean, and there was a time where, you know, there was like a switch in my mind. You tell me to write a poem, I put the switch on, and I could just churn out verses for you. Now it's very rusty. I'll turn it on.
Saved me.
Yeah, as you know.
There are times you've absolutely saved me.
But now you turn the switch on and it's very rusty. It's not working. You have to sit there for like an hour, 2 hours thinking about what I want to do. But at the same time,
it doesn't come from you.
It's not a second nature anymore. You know, I mean, it's always going to be a second nature, but it's not a second nature in that way. But it's good because it means that the poems that do come out, like you've seen recently, for example, some of the ones like the Dhul Fuqar one. You know, like when it does come out, it's quality as over quantity. You know, and that's what I'm going for now. And I suppose eventually what I'm aiming to get towards is the balance between the two. But again, you're always fluctuating throughout your life with your creative art.
Ideally, which one would you choose over the other?
I'm very happy with where I am today.
Yeah.
But I do miss churning out verses. You know, I've got notepads of just like poem after poem after poem. And if you see the books, you know, it's just you wonder how someone has that much time to write them in that many poems.
No, you know what? Like it's great because I then, because of the amount of poems that you've written, you've put it into books, hardbacks that I can actually pick up and read, or even on my phone as well. It saves me from bothering you in a sense, because I know you've got a busy lifestyle, and I know, for example, I have a specific deadline, and I know that because of your priorities it's probably difficult. So I can just go back to the books, and actually anyone who asks me for poems, I say to them, well, look, you have 5 quality books there where you can, and every single scenario within the Shia world, you can pick up a poem and recite. So it's great, and as you said, as a legacy, it's perfect for people to leverage off when it comes to their recitations. So that's amazing. There's a lot more to discuss. I mean, especially when it comes to the process that you go through. So we've really taken a deep dive into the mindset. I think from a technical perspective, what do you go through when it comes to the tracks and to recording the track? Do you, like, how does it work from the beginning to the end, from the track perspective?
I mean, it varies from album to album, and it depends on. Again, we keep saying this, where I am at the time. For this album that came out this past Muharram, the Karbala narrative, it was a quite last minute process, but the whole idea there was that was probably the first album where I actually wrote poems from scratch for a specific purpose. But the albums preceding that, usually I just pick the best poems that I have, give it to the reciters. And it's all about working with reciters specifically. I think this album I'm not working with reciters as much, but the previous ones, I tried to see where the reciter's comfort zone is and prioritize on that, so that you get the best of all worlds. And I think one thing we haven't touched upon yet is couplets online. Oh. Because I think that's actually probably the biggest part of my poetry sphere is what you see online. So what I've been doing recently is writing couplets and posting them on Instagram. As I told you before, there's a whole world out there of Insta poets, and that's something I really want to tap into at the moment. That's my current priority, and that is probably harder than writing a full poem, because you have to summarize what you want to say in just about up to 4 lines, and make sure it's captivating enough to move people the way you want them to be moved. So that, I would say, is definitely the toughest part of writing. I can spend an hour just sitting down trying to think of a couplet.
Really?
Yeah, and
although it's just 2 lines. But
yeah, and sometimes I think about an hour for one and it comes out and it's horrible. Sometimes I think it's horrible, but it speaks to people. So it's really hard. One thing I would say that I've learned is not to worry too much about what people are going to say about it, about if people are going to criticize it, it's not going to speak to people. Because like I said, ultimately, what's important is that it's true to yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And as long as it comes from my heart, as long as I felt it moved me, that's what matters. And I put it out there, and like I said, people like it, they don't like it. It moves people, it doesn't. Absolutely. If it does, it's great. But that's what that matters. And
absolutely.
And we live in a world where success is quantified by likes and shares, right? So recently I done a spoken word piece about airport secondary checks.
Okay.
It didn't do that well on Facebook, but I'm so proud of the writing and the production of it that it didn't bother me, because it's what I wanted to share at the time, right? I mean, when I say it didn't do well on Facebook, I mean comparatively to the Grenfell one or the other one. Yeah. But at the same time, it doesn't matter to me, because
it's fascinating.
It's just that I wanted to write it, I wanted to get that off my chest, and I wanted to share it.
We'll touch upon that in the next episodes, actually, because a lot of people like recognition.
Yeah, everyone does. It's a human nature.
It's a human nature, and the reason why they probably hold back from writing is because they feel like, well, I don't know how many views I'm going to get. And you're right, success is quantified by the amount of likes or shares, and it's not quantified by the actual quality of the poem itself.
But the irony is, the more sincere you are in your art, I mean any art, not even just Islamic art, any art, the more sincere, if you're making a film or whatever, the more sincere you are, the more true to yourself you are, the more successful it usually is.
Definitely.
Which is the irony.
I really look forward to continuing the discussion, actually. It's very, very interesting. On that note, I hand it over to my co-host Zahra, who's with Masooma Jafara on the Dear Masooma show, or Dear Masooma segment of the show. And today they are discussing Sayyida Zainab on that show. Over to you, Zahra.